Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at cybersecurity,
Ooh, fun.
specifically on something that I think we all use pretty much every day,
Yeah.
text messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And um, you've sent us some really interesting articles this week, including one from Forbes by Zach Dossman.
Right.
And it turns out that the FBI and CISA are issuing some pretty serious warnings about how secure our texts actually are.
Yeah, what really caught my eye was the cross-platform texting thing,
Yeah.
between iPhone and Android.
Right.
It seems like a lot of people just assume all texting is basically the same these days,
Right.
but it's not quite true.
I was definitely surprised by that.
Yeah,
I mean, I always thought that my texts were relatively private,
right,
but this article is making me rethink things a little bit.
for sure.
So what's the deal? Why is the FBI suddenly concerned about texting?
Well, it all ties back to some recent cyber attacks that have been attributed to this group called Salt Typhoon. They've been targeting U.S. networks and potentially accessing all sorts of communication data.
Hold on, Salt Typhoon.
Yeah.
That sounds like something out of a spy movie. Who are they exactly?
Well, they're believed to be linked to the Chinese Ministry of Public Security.
Okay.
And, while it doesn't seem like they got their hands on the content of most texts and calls,
Right.
they did manage to steal a ton of metadata.
Metadata. Now, there's another tech term that I'm not entirely familiar with.
Sure.
Could you break that down for me and everyone listening?
Yeah, so think of metadata as like the information about your communication,
Okay.
not the content itself.
Right.
So things like the phone numbers involved,
Hmm.
the time of the call or text, the
Yeah.
duration, even the location of the devices
I see.
might not seem like much,
Right.
but it can reveal a surprising amount about your relationships and activities.
Yeah, so even if they didn't actually read the texts, this Salt Typhoon group could still figure out who was talking to whom, when, and for how long. That's still pretty invasive.
Absolutely. And what's really concerning is that they did compromise the actual content of communications for people involved in government and political activities.
So this isn't just some random hacking spree.
Right.
They seem to be specifically targeting certain individuals and their private conversations.
Exactly.
That's a little scary.
Yeah, and this brings us back to why the FBI and CISA are now urging everyone to use encrypted messaging apps whenever possible,
Okay.
especially apps like WhatsApp and Signal.
So encrypted messaging, that's where the actual content of the message is scrambled, right?
Yeah.
Like a secret code that only the sender and receiver can unlock.
Exactly. It's called end-to-end encryption.
Gotcha.
And here's the key point. Messages between iPhones and Androids using the standard texting apps are not end-to-end encrypted.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Even though both Apple and Google are all about privacy these days,
Right.
regular texts between their phone systems aren't actually private.
That's the irony. And it gets even more complicated when you consider RCS, which is the new messaging standard that's supposed to replace SMS.
You mean the RCS that Samsung's been bragging about in their latest press releases?
Uh-huh.
The one they say everyone is adopting?
The very same.
Okay.
But here's the catch. Even though both Apple and Google are pushing for people to use RCS, the current version still lacks end-to-end encryption for messages between iPhones and Androids.
So even if you and I both have the latest and greatest phones with this fancy RCS messagings, our conversations might not actually be private if we're on different phone platforms.
Right?
What's the point of a new standard if it's not even secure?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it highlights the tension between convenience and security that we're seeing more and more in the digital world.
It's almost like we're being encouraged to adopt new technologies without fully understanding the potential risks or trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this new messaging standard RCS that everyone's pushing, but it's not fully secure for cross-platform texting. And on top of that, we've got these hackers stealing metadata and targeting certain people's conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to feel like nothing is truly private anymore.
It's definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And it underscores why the FBI and CISA are emphasizing the importance of encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp and Signal.
Right.
These apps offer that crucial end-to-end encryption,
Okay.
which means even if someone intercepts your messages, they can't actually read them.
So it sounds like, for now, if you really want to make sure your texts are private,
Yeah.
those are the apps to use,
Yeah.
especially when you're messaging someone on a different type of phone.
That's right. And it's worth noting that both WhatsApp and Signal offer end-to-end encryption for voice and video calls, too.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just about texting. It's
Right.
about all forms of digital communication.
Hold on. Are you saying that even our phone calls might not be as private as we think?
It's certainly a possibility, especially if you're not using a service that explicitly offers end-to-end encryption.
Right.
Remember, traditional phone networks weren't designed with this level of security in mind.
You know, it's funny. Most people I talk to just assume their calls are private.
Yeah.
No one really thinks about it until something like this happens.
Right.
It's easy to take that privacy for granted.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
It's not always obvious how these technologies work and what the potential risks are.
Right.
But that's why it's so important to have these conversations and raise awareness.
Well, speaking of raising awareness, what about this new iOS update that Apple's rolling out?
Yes.
The one that lets iPhone users change their default messaging app.
Right.
You mentioned this earlier, but I didn't quite catch how that factors into all of this.
Right now, when you send a message from an iPhone to an Android, it defaults to SMS, which, as we've discussed, isn't end-to-end encrypted.
Right.
But with this update, iPhone users could potentially choose a more secure option like WhatsApp or Signal as their default, even for cross-platform messaging.
So theoretically, this could make a huge difference in terms of security, at least for iPhone users.
It has the potential to, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's putting more control in the hands of the users and allowing them to prioritize security if that's important to them.
But will they, switching your default messaging app sounds like a bit of a hassle.
Yeah.
Will people really go through the effort, or will they just stick with whatever's easiest?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Right.
Will convenience win out, or will privacy concerns start to outweigh the ease of using the built-in options? I think it'll depend a lot on how much awareness there is about these security issues
Right.
and how Apple promotes this new feature.
This whole situation really highlights the importance of staying informed, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Technology is evolving so rapidly,
Right.
and it's easy to get caught up in the latest shiny new feature without really considering the security implications.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And it's not just about staying informed. It's about making conscious choices based on that information.
Okay.
Do we want to prioritize convenience above all else, or are we willing to make some small adjustments to protect our privacy and security?
Right.
These are the questions we all need to be asking ourselves as we navigate the digital world.
Yeah, it really does feel like a balancing act. We want to embrace the convenience and all the amazing things that technology offers,
Right.
but we also need to be mindful of the potential downsides.
And it's not just about our personal communications either.
Right.
Think about all the other data we generate every day, like our browsing history, our location data, our financial transactions.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to keep track of, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed or even powerless.
I think that's why this whole discussion about text messaging security is so important.
Yeah.
The tangible example of how even seemingly simple actions like sending a text can have unexpected security implications.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust that our data is being protected.
Right.
We need to take an active role in understanding the risks and making informed choices.
So let's bring this back to our listeners today.
Okay.
You've been researching cybersecurity, and it's clearly a topic you care about. What are some key takeaways you think our listeners should be walking away with from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is that cybersecurity is not just about technical solution.
Okay.
It's about awareness and behavior.
Right.
We can have all the latest security software and encryption protocols, but if we're not careful about how we use our devices and the information we share, we're still vulnerable.
Yeah, it's like having a high-tech security system on your house, but leaving the front door wide open.
Exactly.
The technology can only do so much.
Right.
It's up to us to use it wisely.
So a few practical tips for our listeners and anyone else who wants to boost their cybersecurity.
Okay.
First, be mindful of the apps you use, especially for messaging. Consider switching to encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp or Signal,
Okay.
particularly for sensitive conversations.
Adding that in my to-do list right now.
Second, enable automatic security updates on all your devices.
Good point.
This helps patch vulnerabilities and keeps your systems as protected as possible.
Those updates are there for a reason.
And finally, set up multi-factor authentication for all your important accounts.
Oh, okay.
It adds an extra layer of security,
Right.
making it much harder for hackers to gain access even if they steal your password.
It's a little bit of extra effort, but it can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And remember, cybersecurity is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
Right.
As technology evolves, so do the threats. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical details of encryption to the broader implications of data security in our digital lives.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. And hopefully our listeners feel more empowered to make informed decisions about their own cybersecurity.
I hope so too.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are tons of resources available online and in your community to help you stay safe and secure in the digital world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.